It was Christmas Eve, and the snow fell heavy over the quiet streets of Boston, blanketing the city in white. The wind howled through the alleys, rattling old shutters and scattering trash across the sidewalks. Most families were nestled by warm fires, the scent of cinnamon and pine filling their homes. But not everyone was safe, not everyone was warm. Amid the storm, a small figure stumbled along the icy pavement. 7-year-old Emma clutched a threadbare stuffed bunny to her chest, her tiny fingers stiff with cold. Her shoes were torn, her coat too thin, and her eyes wide with fear, searching desperately for a place to hide. She was a ghost among the holiday lights, invisible to everyone except one man. Alexander Blackwood, billionaire and recluse, had stepped out onto his estate's snow-covered driveway, checking the last details for his holiday gala. The crunch of footsteps in the snow caught his attention, and then he saw her, shivering alone, her lips quivering as she whispered, "Sir, may I sleep in your doghouse tonight?" Time seemed to stop. The lights of his mansion glinted against the snow, but all Alexander could see was her small, trembling face. In that instant, all the contracts, all the deals, all the wealth in the world felt meaningless. He realized that one child's plea could awaken a heart long closed, a heart that had forgotten what it meant to care. What would you do if you were in his shoes? Could you turn away, or would you open your door and your heart? If this story touched you, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to Golden Tales. Tell us in the comments below, where in the world are you watching this story tonight? We want to hear your voice and connect across the miles, because sometimes, even strangers can be family in the moments that matter most. The biting winter wind howled down the narrow streets of Boston, snowflakes swirling like tiny dancers caught in a chaotic ballet. The glow from street lamps reflected off wet sidewalks, casting flickers of gold onto the ice-slicked pavement. Holiday decorations adorned the townhouses, and the scent of pine and roasted chestnuts mingled with the chill in the air, but for one small girl, the season's cheer offered no comfort. 7-year-old Emily Carter, no relation to anyone rich, despite sharing a surname, ran barefoot through the snow-covered alleyways, her thin coat soaked through. The wind cut through her like a knife, her ragged mittens barely shielding her hands. Clutched to her chest was a threadbare stuffed bunny, ears drooping, fur matted, yet still sacred in her small, desperate world. Each step through the slush brought a fresh shiver, but fear and cold were only secondary to the hunger gnawing at her belly. Earlier, a drunken man had shoved her to the ground, his leather boots splashing icy mud across her face. "You worthless street rat," he had growled before disappearing into the dark. Emily sat for a moment, frozen, hugging her bunny as though it could somehow shield her from the cruelty of the world. Her small frame trembled, both from cold and the memory of the shove, when a new presence interrupted the moment, the deep, commanding voice of a man. "Touch her again and you'll regret it." Emily's eyes widened, snowflakes clinging to her hair. She barely dared to breathe as a tall figure emerged from the glow of the streetlights. Richard Hawthorne, billionaire and real estate tycoon, stepped through the snow with the kind of quiet authority money and experience had granted him. At 46, his name carried weight from New York to Los Angeles. He commanded boardrooms with the same certainty he now brought to this alleyway. Richard's life was a fortress of glass, marble, and power. Luxury yachts, Manhattan penthouses, private jets, he had acquired them all. But connection, real human connection, had always eluded him. Until now. Emily didn't know what prompted her next words, but they emerged in a breathless whisper, barely audible above the winter wind. "So, may I sleep in your doghouse tonight?" Richard froze, the world narrowing to the tiny, soaked figure before him. A doghouse? She was asking for a doghouse, not shelter in a palace, not a bed in a hotel. Yet the plea in her wide, innocent eyes struck something deep within him, something dormant for decades. "You can't stay out here," he finally said, his voice firmer than he expected. She lowered her gaze, shivering in the snow, her lips pressed into a thin line. I won't make a mess. I just need to stay warm, she whispered. He blinked, unprepared. In boardrooms, he had negotiated billions, mediated hostile takeovers, outmaneuvered competitors with ruthless precision. Yet here he was, undone by a 7-year-old girl. Emily, what's your name? He asked, crouching to meet her gaze. Emily, she murmured, clutching her bunny tighter. Richard saw the scratches along her arms, the caked mud on her hands, the trembling of her small shoulders beneath the wet coat. But it was her eyes that struck him most, wide, dark, filled with fear yet glimmering with a fragile hope that seemed far too strong for someone so small. Emily, you can't sleep outside tonight, he said gently. Come inside. At least until you're warm. Her lips parted, disbelief flickering across her frozen face. Inside, she whispered. Yes. Inside. He led her up the drive, past the towering fir trees adorned with twinkling Christmas lights. Snow clung to the branches like powdered sugar. His mansion, usually a monument to isolation, now seemed to her a palace of possibility. She stepped cautiously, leaving wet footprints across the polished marble foyer, her breath misting in the warm air. The smell of pine, of cedar, of rich leather and faint vanilla candles enveloped her. Emily's eyes traveled to the towering Christmas tree in the corner, ornaments glittering like captured stars, and the pile of gifts waiting below. She had never imagined such warmth, such safety in her life. Richard handed her a large, soft towel. This is for you, he said. Emily's hands trembled as she wrapped herself, the towel swallowing her tiny frame. For me, she asked, disbelief and wonder mingling in her voice. Yes. You can take a bath, warm up, and forget the cold for a while, he said. She stepped into the steaming bath, fingers brushing the rising mist, marveling at how the water enveloped her like a soft blanket. For the first time in months, perhaps years, she felt truly safe. When she emerged, wrapped in another towel, Richard offered her one of his oversized shirts. It hung down to her knees, soft and warm. Emily smiled faintly, adjusting the fabric with care. You must be hungry, he said. Emily nodded silently, her stomach growling in agreement. In the kitchen, Richard initially considered the vast array of delicacies. Smoked salmon, imported cheeses, fine wines. But he paused, realizing none of that mattered. He prepared instead a simple plate of chocolate chip cookies and a mug of hot cocoa. He placed them before Emily, who held the mug with both hands, savoring each sip, eyes closed in quiet joy. Tears glimmered on her lashes. It's too good, she whispered. Richard watched quietly, his chest tightening. He noticed the way she slipped a cookie into her pocket when she thought he wasn't looking, habits of survival too deeply ingrained to disappear overnight. Can I sleep on the couch? She asked timidly after finishing. You'll sleep in the guest room, he replied, a gentle authority in his voice. Her eyes widened at the vast room, the enormous bed dressed in white linens. It's too big, she murmured. It's yours tonight, he said. She climbed onto the bed, disappearing into the folds of blankets, her bunny tucked securely under her arm. Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne, she whispered. For Richard, gratitude from a child who had nothing struck deeper than any accolade, any business victory. That Christmas Eve, the storm outside raged, but inside, warmth and a fragile peace settled. For Emily, the mansion was more than shelter, it was a glimpse of belonging. And for Richard, her presence cracked open a door to the human connection he had long abandoned. The next morning, snow blanketed the estate in sparkling white. Sunlight glinted off the ice-encrusted windows. Emily awoke without shivering, stretching beneath the heavy blanket, clutching her bunny. The bath, the warmth, the food, all had been real. Downstairs, Richard sat at the table, a simple breakfast laid out, toast, eggs, and fruit. Yet the room no longer felt empty. He watched as Emily ate, noting the careful way she saved pieces of bread, small habits from a life of scarcity. You need proper clothes, he said gently. Emily blinked, uncertain, until he added, We'll go together. They drove into Boston proper, the city gleaming under a fresh snowfall. Storefronts were adorned with wreaths, lights twinkling, carolers singing in the distance. Emily pressed her face to the window, eyes wide at the spectacle. Inside the clothing store, she picked modest items. A simple dress, a pair of jeans. "These are enough," she said softly. "You don't have to spend so much." "Emily, you deserve more than enough," Richard said firmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Suddenly, 3 men loomed outside, eyes locked on Emily. Her small hand gripped Richard's arm. "It's them," she whispered. The men advanced with menace. "Looks like you found our little friend," one sneered. "You belong to us now." Richard's heart pounded. "She's a child. You will not touch her," he said, stepping forward. The men laughed, but Richard acted with calm decisiveness, handing over some cash to buy time. "Take this and never come back." They sneered, but Emily's courage emerged. Using sharp memory and quick thinking, she exposed weaknesses in their knowledge of each other, names, addresses, secrets, enough to scatter them. Authorities arrived moments later, and the danger passed, but Richard's protective resolve only strengthened. Days later, a social worker, Clara Reynolds, came to the estate, checking on Emily's well-being. She explained the legal procedures, the need for documentation. But Richard knew that Emily's safety and trust were not matters for bureaucracy. They were matters of love and courage. Over the following weeks, Richard fortified the estate and spent every moment ensuring Emily felt safe. For the first time in his life, he considered family not as a formality or a name, but as a bond earned through care, presence, and trust. As Christmas morning approached, Emily helped decorate a small corner of the estate garden. She had rebuilt a simple doghouse, painted white, surrounded by flowers she planted herself. On a plaque, "For every child searching for a home, and for those who have found one." "You once asked me for a doghouse," Richard said softly. Emily nodded. "But you gave me a home," he whispered, voice breaking. "No," she corrected, eyes shining. "You gave me family." The snow glimmered under the early morning sun, the mansion now a home filled with laughter, warmth, and hope. The storm that had brought Emily to his doorstep had become a gift, forging a bond stronger than fear, stronger than isolation. From that Christmas forward, Richard Hawthorne's estate was no longer a fortress of solitude. It was a sanctuary of love and family. Together, they established Emily's Haven, a network of shelters across the United States, offering warmth, food, education, and safety to children who, like Emily, had once only dreamed of belonging. And so, what began with a trembling voice in the snow, asking to sleep in a doghouse, became a story of courage, compassion, and the transformative power of love. Because sometimes, the greatest gifts come not wrapped under a tree, but in the simple question whispered by a child. "Can I stay?" As the first rays of Christmas morning spilled through the windows, Richard Hawthorne watched Emily Carter stir beneath the soft blankets of her new bed. The snow outside glistened like tiny diamonds, but it was the warmth in her small, trusting smile that lit up the mansion more than any chandelier ever could. She stretched, yawned, and hugged her worn stuffed bunny close, unaware of just how much her courage had changed everything. Richard felt a weight lift from his chest, a burden he hadn't realized he'd carried for decades. The contracts, the deals, the endless pursuit of wealth, they were nothing compared to the quiet joy of protecting a child, of offering her a place to belong. For the first time, he understood that love isn't measured in fortunes or titles. It is felt in the moments we open our hearts, even when the world feels harsh and unforgiving. That Christmas, a billionaire and a little girl discovered a bond neither had expected. A bond built on trust, courage, and the simple act of kindness. Emily had found a home, and Richard had found a family. The storm that had brought her to his doorstep had, in truth, delivered the greatest gift of all: connection, hope, and the chance to begin anew. Where are you watching from tonight? Share your city below, and remember, Sometimes the smallest act of compassion can change a life forever.